Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's unfortunate that the member hardly spoke about anything that is in this bill. I think he is awaiting the forthcoming justice bill that we will be introducing. I believe he could use this speech at that time because that justice bill will include many of these measures. But I do want to talk about some things that we can constructively work on. And one thing is that this bill exists because there were gaps. These gaps also existed under previous Conservative governments. Under previous Conservative governments, there was no limit on how much cash could be spent on goods in this country. There weren't these provisions. It was the same immigration rules as well. And so this bill exists because this new Liberal government is getting tough on crime and recognizes that we need to fill the gaps in order to keep Canadians safe. Would you agree?
Through the chair, the honourable member for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations.
Through the chair, Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely laughable whenever I and my colleagues hear about this brand new Liberal government. My God, the member that just asked me the question has been here literally since 2015. She's not new. 90% of that bench is all old. It's being controlled by the same Liberal operation that's been in existence since 2015. And you know, when are they finally going to start reflecting and looking themselves in the mirror to say, hey, we have failed Canadians, we have let them down, we failed to protect our borders, we've let repeat violent offenders in and out of the criminal justice system blame themselves. Shame on them for blaming Stephen Harper and the past Conservative government that actually cared about victims over the rights of criminals.
Question et commentaire. L'honorable député de Gaspésie.
The Honourable Member for Gaspésie, Les Îles de la Madeleine, Listigouche. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for my colleague who's very critical of the bill. He spoke about unity when it comes to fentanyl trafficking. The changes to the Canada Post Act will allow Canada Post workers to open not only packages but also letters when they have grounds to suspect that something is amiss. How does my colleague feel about that? Would this be a useful way to fight drug trafficking and especially fentanyl trafficking?
And I know some members on the Liberal bench are tired of hearing this, but it's important to frame the response. And, you know, the member for Waterloo loves to chime, and maybe she'll get the opportunity to ask me a question, but perhaps she can show me the courtesy of actually responding to the question without being chirped and interrupted. But as you're doing right now, in my previous capacity, Mr. Speaker, not only was I a prosecutor, I was a defense counsel. And I will fight with every last breath the charter rights, freedoms of every Canadian. And what I find very, very concerning is that there ought not to be a choice, as this government has framed Bill C-2, a choice between protecting civil liberties and law enforcement. And I'm sure I'm going to hear a question about, oh, but all the police associations are all in favor of Bill C-2. Well, of course they are. They've been pleading and begging for some legislative relief from this government for 10 years. So it's one small step.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to congratulate the member on his speech and his excellent work on this. One of the things I noticed talking to people in my riding and in other places during the election was just how frustrating it is for people who work in law enforcement when they see the failures on crime of this Liberal government. You've got people who go out, work hard every day, risking their lives to try to keep the rest of us safe. And that when they catch someone involved in crime, very often they're released on bail, even if it's a repeat violent offender. I wonder if the member can share just a little bit about how the approach the Liberals have taken is impacting law enforcement and what the response has been to the actions of this government by those who work on the front lines.
No, member for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations.
I thank my colleague for that excellent question, Mr. Speaker. In my capacity as a shadow critic for Justice and the Attorney General, a position that I've had for almost a year now, I've had the opportunity of traveling right across this great country. I have spoken with local law enforcement. I have spoken with presidents of police associations. I've spoken with chiefs. I've spoken with provincial and territorial attorney generals. They are all unanimous in their frustration with this Liberal government. The Liberal government promised them real substantive bail reform. They were so proud when Bill C-48 was passed into law, which was nothing more than a Band-Aid on a serious issue. They are frustrated, they are demoralized, they want more relief that this government refuses to give.
Questions and comments? We'll go to the member for Waterloo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I regret that the member feels that he's being chirped. I was actually just participating in the comments that were being shared. And where I think I'm coming from is that this legislation, at least in the riding of Waterloo, it's not a monolith of voices. People are interested in this legislation. Today we heard from speeches from actually colleagues of the Conservative Party as well as the Bloc suggesting this legislation did have some ability, amendments could be considered, but there was value to the legislation. It just isn't exactly in the way that some members would like to see it. I recognize that there is more work to do. What I would like to hear from the member, is there merits for this legislation? If police associations are asking for it, we are providing it. Is there merits to this legislation? Should we try to make it better? Should we try to improve? And now you see the... Okay, thank you.
Order. The honourable member for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations.
Mr. Speaker, as I said in my response to my last question, law enforcement have long asked for a number of legislative reforms. What Bill C-2 does is it moves the needle ever so slightly by expanding the search powers that police officers have when they are investigating sophisticated transnational organized crime entities, the fentanyl traffickers that I told you about, but still at the expense of civil liberties. You know, this government still hasn't produced a charter statement, which is astonishing. But the whole purpose behind this, defense lawyers, Mr. Speaker, are laughing, they're smiling, they're going to be smiling all the way to the bank as they launch charter challenge.
We're trying to get two more brief questions. The member for Courtney Alberni, a brief 30-second question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we've heard this government, they've announced a fentanyl czar. They've had an auto theft summit. I'm not saying that that's not important. But, Mr. Speaker, they still haven't named a czar to help support those living with addiction. They still haven't announced a plan on how they're going to create treatment on demand. They still haven't had a summit on the toxic drug crisis, despite the loss of over 50,000 Canadians. Through you, Mr. Speaker, did my colleague agree that those also need to be a priority when it comes to this discussion?
Member for Brantford, Brant, Six Nations, 30 seconds.
I thank my NDP member for that excellent question and great observation. Where is the Minister for Addictions? We had it in the 44th, but clearly not a priority for the Prime Minister and his so-called new government. As I indicated in my speech, we have got a fentanyl national crisis. People are dying every day. There's blood on the hands of all of those Liberal members for showing such disrespect to those struggling with these addiction measures to ensure that there's adequate representation at a national level.
Question et commentaire.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Salaberry-Soulanges. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I was just wondering, I know that my colleague has some type of affection or concern, rather, for firearms. I'd like him to explain, if in his opinion, in C2, they talk about more power to the Coast Guard to document and observe situations. Does he think this is a good tool to hunt illegal arms?
A very quick response from the member for Brantford.
Yes, I do believe that there is value in arming our Coast Guard. with additional powers. I toured the Port of Vancouver recently, Mr. Speaker, and I was appalled to learn of the clever ways that criminals and organized crime are smuggling drugs and weapons into our border with basically zero ability of the Coast Guard and law enforcement.
That does bring us to the end of that time.